Conversations.
Helps to unmute the mic. Helps to unmute the mic. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Strong Conversations, Hot Takes from a Cultural Firebrand. I am still your host, Dr. Carolyn Strong, and I have an awesome visitor with me today to talk race and children. So, Dr. Palmer, please introduce yourself.
Well, thank you for having me, Dr. Strong. I'm Dr. Bedford Palmer. I am a psychologist, a counseling psychologist, licensed in the state of California, the chair on sabbatical of the counseling department at St. Mary's College, California. I have a small, well, it's not small anymore. I have a group private practice called Deeper Than Color. So if you're looking for a more culturally responsive psychotherapy in California, you can hit us up there. And to the conversation, I am the author of 2 children's books. One is out right now. It's called Daddy, Why Am I Brown? A healthy conversation about skin color and family. And the one that I just had, we completed a successful Kickstarter for, Black Joy, Healthy Conversation About Race, which will be out in the next month or so, as soon as we can kind of take the Kickstarter funds and get it over to getting everything printed. So look out for that. It'll be on pre-order soon.
Oh, definitely. Because in this house, we look for all of the things that we can find to have those conversations. My daughters are 6 and 20, and nobody is exempt from 20. Sorry, that just happened on Monday. Still getting used to that. We don't shy away from those conversations. I did just purchase the Stamped from the Beginning for Kids, the small children's version. So we're going to have that conversation, and we're definitely going to have this conversation as well. And I think one of the things, and we talked about this a little bit, one of the things I didn't know was that this was actually a sequel. So tell me about the first book, because I don't have it. I will by the end of the episode, but I don't have it now because I need to add it to Ever's collection.
Okay. So the first book, this is the first book. So Daddy, Why Am I Brown is a book that is talking about, it's a conversation between a little girl and her father. The little girl is a multi-ethnic girl. She is African. She's Black, African-American, Chinese. Her mom is like half Chinese and Black, and her dad is African-American. She basically looks at mom and dad, see that they have kind of different skin tones, and she asks, like, why am I brown, by referring to her skin tone looking different. Now, the conversation that goes through the book is basically the dad talking about skin color and talking about how that relates to, one, first talking properly about skin color. What is skin? What are the actual colors that make up our skin? And moving away from conversations around, like, food items like chocolate and cocoa and stuff like that, and thinking more in terms of something like terracotta or russet.
You mean actual colors?
Like actual colors, right? That aren't consumed, because a lot of times when we talk about colors, skin color, particularly for Black people, we talk about consumable objects, and that just kind of continues the whole process of consuming of Black bodies, right? It's just another way of kind of getting to that space. So giving a lexicon, giving a vocabulary around colors that I think from a psych perspective is very similar to when we give people the emotion faces, because most people only know happy, sad, angry, and they're like, oh, what does chagrin mean, right? And so you give people more language, and then they can express themselves better.
Absolutely. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No. So the story basically follows the dad and the daughter, and they're basically talking about, why her skin's different from dad and mom, and then where their skin color comes from in general. So like talking about where her different aspects of herself come from. Where's the Chinese part? Where's the black part? Where's the African part? How's that different from the European pieces? Because there's a little European mixed in all of us, especially if you're African American. We all got a little, and didn't come usually on our own terms.
I was
And
gonna
so,
say sans consent.
exactly. So there's talk about lineage, ancestors, and then like the idea about kind of melanin and how melanin works based on your position, where your people were from, positioned on the globe. So the idea is to kind of approach skin color from a perspective of being really uh, empowering, and at the same time talking about the science of it, as opposed to just kind of focusing on you're pretty and you're beautiful, which I think is a really important message. I just think that the space that I could walk into was coming more from the scientific information side.
No,
Um,
that makes sense. And we are not a multi-ethnic family, but we will be purchasing the book because nobody in this house is the same skin color. So, welcome to being black in America. So, I think that a lot of families could use this to have those conversations, because those are conversations that need to happen in a healthy way, because they happen. They just don't always happen in a healthy way.
Yeah, and I think like the book is meant to short circuit the conversation that might happen when, and I experienced this. I think a lot of people of color experience this. You go when you're kindergarten, first grade, you have that first lesson around crayons and coloring and all that stuff. And if you have brown skin, invariably one of your classmates is going to make a statement about your skin looking like dirt or poop or some other thing that's really negative. And so I wanted to give kids a little bit of armor, black and brown kids, a little bit of armor to kind of say, hey, no, my skin looks like terracotta. I don't know why you're saying it that way, and things like that. Give teachers some context and potentially a tool to use to better present this type of stuff, because a lot of times teachers, they go into these discussions, and who talks about colors this way? It's not like it just isn't talked about that much. So the stuff is allowed to occur, and then you have to do a bunch of like fixing of stuff, hopefully. If you're in the right, when I was a kid, it didn't get fixed, it was just something I had to like endure. And it also, my hope is that white parents and white kids will read the book and become more educated about skin color as well, because they have skin color too. It's not, no one's neutral. Everyone has a particular color, and that's talked
Right.
about in the book as well.
So that's book number one. And I am going to, either at some point tonight, I will drop your Deeper Than Color link, and I'll drop the links for both books, so
Mhm.
that anybody that wants to go in and take a look and purchase, or anybody in California that is in need of services for people of color, they can take advantage of that awesome resource. So that's book one. Now, where do we land for book two?
So for book two, so book one takes place maybe a couple of years before book two happens, and in book one, the main character Joy, you could consider her either in right before she starts kindergarten or actually in kindergarten. So it's a little bit more geared towards kids from K to like two, K to second grade maybe. The next book is geared more for kids from first to fifth grade,
So we're
and so
following the same kids chronologically.
same kid, same family.
Okay.
And what's basically occurring in Black Joy, which is, again, it's a healthy conversation about race, and the series is called the Healthy Conversation series. Um, and so basically it starts off with Joy sitting with her parents, and they're watching a Black Lives Matter demonstration on TV. And so if you're, a lot of Black kids will have this conversation when we have that conversation about brownness, right? So like you'll go home after the crayon stuff, you learn about the brown, and like you talk to your parents, and they kind of reassure you that your skin is pretty and your skin is beautiful, and they talk about how brown and black are a little bit different and stuff like that, because a black crayon doesn't usually fit for most of us, right? And invariably they'll come, little kids are critical thinkers. They think, and at some point or another they'll come back and say, hey, if my skin's brown, why are you saying that I'm black, right?
Yes, that
Right.
happens in I, two kids, 13 years apart, and I've been through that conversation twice because that is it. I am
Right.
brown. I am not black. I am brown.
Right. And so in the book, basically, they're watching this Black Lives Matter protest. Both parents are wearing Black Lives Matter shirts. And Joy looks up and says, well, what's the deal? Why are we identifying? Why I'm looking at all these people with all these shirts on. I'm looking at you. I'm looking at me. Very few of the people actually look black. Most of them are brown.
Mm,
And there are even people who are wearing the colors and stuff, and they don't look black at all. They don't look like brown at all. And so the 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 book is helping to kind of talk about the idea that race is a construct that's outside of the specific color, right? And so they transport into the protests basically, and they're walking through a city and they're having this conversation about what is race, and so we talk about race as a story, instead of trying to bring college words in. We say it's a story because it's what a concept is. It's just, it has meaning and it comes from someplace. And we talk about the story of race, and we talk very explicitly about it, not in ways that would that aren't age appropriate, but like talking about the fact that, for instance, the story was made up by Europeans, and those Europeans made up the story because they wanted to go out into the world, and they wanted to visit places, and when they got there, they wanted to eat the good food and keep the nice clothes, and they wanted to live in those spaces, and they didn't really want to pay for any of it, and they didn't really want to work on a lot of stuff, so they needed to justify taking what they wanted, which was, and we talk about that in terms of bullying, and the best way that they could figure it out was to make up this story about race that changed things, right? And so the story kind of talks about how that story is built up, and it addresses Joy's reaction to it, which is, this isn't great. I don't like this. It's not a good story, Dad. Why are you telling me this? And then it transitions into, well, you got to understand this story so you can kind of function. And here's how we can reconceptualize this story. And we talk about our story, and we talk about resilience and love and taking care of each other, and why we would consider ourselves black, even though it's a story that was made up. And so that's kind of where it comes to this idea of Black joy, which is, for me, a really important concept. I'm in Oakland, and it's the home of the Black Joy Parade, and the whole idea of there being this cultural get together for Black folks that's not based on some sort of negative, deficit oriented or crisis oriented thing. It's just, we're just beautiful and wonderful, and why not have a parade about it, And so that's kind of the linkage in my head for some of the inspiration around this, and like thinking in terms of that concept, which is also one of the reasons why I have them kind of walk the community. And one of the cool things about the book that I'm really, really proud of is I was able to get with a Black artist down in San Diego named Charlene Mosley, and she was able to simulate street art, and so the story is told in these panels of street art. So it's like they're walking
oh,
by and they
nice.
see kind of the graffiti on the wall, not the graffiti, but the street art on the wall, and that's kind of how the bubbles, the thought bubbles, and all that kind of stuff show up. So it's a really, really pretty book.
It sounds like it. And like I said, I can't wait to get it for this 6-year-old of mine and her friends. I guess my next question is, I, as a Black person, understand the need to tell these stories and to have these conversations for young children. But can you just kind of address for a minute those that have the privilege, and I say it that way for a reason, those
Mm-hmm.
that have the privilege to address these issues later or when they see fit? And one of the things that I hear as someone who kind of dwells in these equity and anti-racist spaces is, why do you want to introduce these kids to this stuff so young? And my thing is, do we remember how old Ruby Bridges was? Do we remember how old a lot of these children were? So
Mhm.
as a psychologist, the argument that comes at me is always that it will do harm. I am not a mental health professional, so I can't address it from that standpoint. My standpoint is usually, how is it okay for one group to experience this from birth, but not okay for another group to talk about it? But
Mhm.
coming from your lens, how should we be addressing that issue? Because it's a pervasive issue.
You know, I hear that sometimes, and it's a frustrating way to frame it, that people bring that whole idea of like, why, is this going to hurt our kids and stuff. And I think there are a lot of different things to say. Now, there's the nicer things, and then there's the more snarky, mean, like responsive things. And I'll try to I'm actually going to talk about a couple of them. But on the base bottom of it all, the idea that white kids are not learning about race at early ages is ridiculous. They are learning about race the same time as black kids and every other kind of kid is learning about race, because we learn about race and we learn about racism in the street. We learn about it watching television. We learn about it reading books. We learn about it in every aspect of this caste system that we live in, telling us what we're allowed to do and what we're not allowed to do. The fact that white kids are allowed to just be free, and they're told who to be worried about and who not to be worried about, and how to interact with the police and how to interact with like authority and all this other stuff. This is all lessons about race there. Um, the idea that learning about things that hurt other kids is something that they should be shielded from, when they sometimes are the ones who end up hurting other kids based on their racial learning already, is just saying that white kids, their safety, their lives, their well-being is more important than black kids. That's like the underlying message. Like, it's okay for your kids to suffer. We're going to protect our kids from that. And, by the way, we don't really care. Like, that's what that message is. And to that, I say, I don't care about you. It's like, I don't know what to tell you if you're gonna take that stance. Um, learn little young kids, if we're gonna be like super real about it, how to everyone learning about racial justice and all that stuff. Young white kids, in terms of like in white communities, and we're talking about white folks because we're talking about white privilege right now. Um, the younger and more innocent the kid is, the better the time they can learn about this stuff, because they probably haven't done all the stuff. They haven't had a lot of time to be involved in white supremacy. So
Yeah.
not only is it helping to kind of prevent them from taking on some of these tools of oppression, but it's also getting to them before they have any reason to feel guilt, you know? And when we're talking to grown-ups, there's good reason. Like, you're not going to tell me you're a white person in the United States who haven't engaged in white privilege. It doesn't happen. The same way you're not going to tell me you're a man and you haven't engaged in misogyny, or that you're heterosexual and you haven't engaged in some sort of homophobic or heterosexist stuff. The norm is for that to be the case, right? That's what we get taught, and that's why, if we're going to be super real with it, the curriculum around color doesn't talk about color in a way that makes sense. It talks about it in a way that leads to these kind of damaging ideas around color. Like, why
Yeah.
is it that you don't learn what cayenne is and what hickory is and all these other like more kind of middle colors when you're kids?
They're
Because they
starting
want.
to. That's again, that's one of the
Mhm.
things that I get to see with my daughters being so far apart, is that sometime when the oldest one stopped using crayons and the
Mhm.
youngest one started, they created these skin color packs that were
Mhm.
literally just about skin color.
Right.
And I think like the biggest skin color pack is of crayons is actually like 24,
Right.
which is still again relatively new and something that's just come about. I want to say because she's 6, so in the last
Mhm.
5 or 6 years, maybe
Yeah.
8 at the most. Because when the oldest was coming along, you got the brown crayon, you got the peach
Mhm.
crayon, and the tan crayon, and you
Mhm.
figured it out.
Right. How much you want to bet that in some school board somewhere in the U.S. they're debating whether those crayons are some sort of threat? right? I mean, like it, those there's a there. I remember as like the band aids, the skin color, the multi skin color band aids, the crayons, all this stuff. They all come in, and people don't like we rejoice, and our allies rejoice, but there's a whole swath of people who are threatened by the idea that we will be represented in any way whatsoever.
No, I
And
agree, but I do have to say that yes, like I was never really that excited about the Band-Aid, honestly, not because of I was excited about the representation part, but
mm,
I guess I was never one of those people that felt conscious about self-conscious about the fact that I was wearing a Band-Aid because I
mm,
know it's supposed to be to blend in and be invisible and I'm like, what? I hurt myself. I'm human. Okay, what? So I never really felt the need to hide my band-aid. I am a klutz with no depth perception. It happens.
I hear
But
that.
I do see the significance.
I think the thing is that and this is what the way that privilege works, right? It makes it feel like it's normal for you not to have it, you
Yeah.
know. And so, I mean, if we want to get deep on skin color, like if like deeper than deep on skin color, um, the electronic sensors that
Oh, I know.
right there's sensors and all kinds of stuff that will do measurements of whether you're there, whether your skin is present, and things under your skin. All of those are calibrated to white skin,
Yeah,
right?
they
And
don't work for me typically.
right, so that means
Um
that you get your hands dirty up in the bathroom at the Sizzler or wherever. I don't know if Sizzler still existed. This was a thing that popped in my head. At the McDonald's or whatever,
if
you
it
go
does, they
in,
don't have the automatic faucets.
right, and then but in a more let's say like in a more sinister way, heart monitors don't work the same,
No,
you know,
neither do
and
the pulse ox.
pulse ox, yeah, all the things that have the light that go through your skin. I got this Apple Watch, pay all this money for it, and the thing is barely, doesn't take measurements the same as it would because it's not done in a way, it was not normed on our skin color, right? It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't engineered to work for us. And I would even go so far as to say the engineers didn't think about it. It wasn't like the privilege is not that they were like, I'm going to do this so it don't work for black people and brown people. It's just that they were like, oh, I'm going to do it for skin color, and all they think about is theirs. And
Right.
that's the point of like doing this early education, is so that at the base layer, when you come to adulthood, you have an understanding of the substrate you're working with, and you have a decision. And I think that that's the thing that people don't want to talk about when they're talking about the CRT stuff and all that, the fake CRT stuff and all that other stuff. They don't want their kids to have the choice not to be the same. They don't want
Oh,
their kids to have the
absolutely.
choice to be anti-racist and all that stuff. And that's the point of what I'm doing, is trying to like put together materials so that kids have choices, so that when I'm working with adults, because I work with adults, that's my primary. I'm a counseling psychologist, so I don't really work with kids very often. Um, if I was able to get with this adult when they were a child, half the time when we're talking about race stuff, they would be in a better shape right now if they had more tools to combat the negative messages. And that goes for black people, white people, Asian people, Latinx people, all the folks. Like if we were able to see this system, something akin to the Matrix, right? If you can see all the little lines and the codes, you understand how it works, it's not as maddening. It doesn't like hit you as hard because you see that, oh, okay, you don't like me, you didn't want to like me, so me trying to figure out how to make you like me doesn't make that much sense,
Yeah.
and I can focus on the people who do. you know I can figure out who an ally is and how to deal with allies before feeling the betrayal of the people who you thought you were supposed to be able to trust.
Absolutely. So I guess my next question is, besides your book, in addition to your book, not besides, in addition to Black Joy, where do we start? How do we start having these conversations? How do we create these safe spaces, true safe spaces, and
Mm,
not this false notion of safe? Because again, a lot of times in the anti-racism equity spaces where I dwell, safe means I'm not going to feel uncomfortable. And the
mm,
reality of the situation is you can't do this work as a human, not even, I won't even say as a as a human being, and feel uncomfortable.
mhm,
So we've got to get away from this notion of that a safe space means that I'm going to not feel uncomfortable while I do this work. So how do we create, or where do we start to create truly safe spaces for these children and the people that are being charged with talking to them about it, which is probably their parents at this age?
I don't necessarily think that there is a safe space, because we live in a society that wants to separate people based on this race piece, and they also like devalue the humanity of people based on this. So there's not going to be a space where you can safely talk about this horrible thing that's happening around us. Now, what I do think is that people talk about discomfort and don't understand what discomfort is, because change comes with discomfort. If you
Yes.
anything that's worth doing, like if you learn to ride a bike, it's uncomfortable at first. You learn to drive a car, it's uncomfortable at first. If you start trying to work out and get your body into the way you want it to be, it's going to be uncomfortable. Sitting still is uncomfortable at first. You know what I'm saying? Like everything is uncomfortable. So the question is what's the value of the discomfort? And how do you interpret that discomfort? And if the discomfort in these spaces is discomfort with acknowledging the stuff that you've been a party to, right? So as a man, whenever I talk to a woman about like misogyny and sexism, there's a part of me that I don't want to talk about the stuff, because I know if I keep talking too far, when I talk about the most extreme things, then I could be like, yeah, I didn't really engage in that. But then when you start talking about, well, did you catcall? Did you ever act misogynistically? Did you ever say anything? Yeah, because there was a time before I learned. Right. And so, but if I'm allowed to say, well, that makes me uncomfortable, so therefore I don't want to talk about it, therefore I don't want to grow, what does that do to the woman who's standing in front of me in terms of like how they can gauge how safe I could ever be with them? And so there's a consequence to not wanting to engage in this type of work. And I think that that's the thing, that there's like a catch-22 where people want to both be considered, oh, don't ever call me a racist, don't ever think of me as racist, but I don't want to do the work for it. So, and basically in doing that, they're enacting the type of privilege that they're saying they don't have, right? Because they're saying, trust me, even though I'm untrustworthy based on my own actions.
Or I haven't done anything to earn your trust.
Right. So, I mean, and don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say like, there's no such thing as allyship and all that stuff. What I'm saying is that people, when we talk about building these spaces, we need to be thinking about the fact that folks need to stretch themselves for these spaces, especially if you're coming from a space of privilege. And if we're going to be, again, I really strongly believe, like when you're talking about kids, it's the younger you are, the easier it is to kind of learn this stuff. Because the way that I look at people is like we develop and we learn things over time. And sometimes we learn things that help us, and sometimes we learn things that harm us, right? Racism is a harmful thing for everybody involved. A person who's living, I mean, we can just look at the pandemic, right? Like somewhere, someone connected wearing a mask and getting vaccinated to being, they connected that to liberalism, and liberalism is anti-racist. And so for folks to want to, like, the wedge issue of race has now become a health issue for a bunch of people. So like, people in the rural South, like white folks who would normally be served by a Republican, blah, 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 they're endangered by their belief set because it's connected to race, and because the dissonance that comes with any kind of racial justice based on the stuff that they got taught as kids, that they were taught by parents, they were taught by teachers, they were taught by the TV shows and stuff like that, has made it so that they're so stuck in it that they can't even cover their own face to keep themselves safe. And they'll send their kids to school, have a whole protest about like not wearing masks. Like, I don't want my kid to wear a mask. You want your kids exposed to virus? Ain't no virus. And if you keep getting deeper and deeper into it, it comes down to these wedge issues around race. Yeah. And that's what I think we have to kind of look at it as, is there's a disconnect from reality. And it's not like a mental health issue. It's more of a philosophical issue, but it's a disconnect from reality that people choose to live within.
Yeah, and honestly, I think that that can be true of anything that you fervently believe, even
Mm-hmm.
when it is proven that you're inaccurate. Some
Mm-hmm.
people, and again, I don't know, you said it's not a mental health issue. Some people just dig their heels in regardless, and you can
Mm-hmm.
tell them the sky is blue. Nope, it's purple. Okay, open your eyes and look right there. That's purple. And there's really, unfortunately, not a lot that you can do to assuage them. And I think that that's why working with children is so important,
Mm-hmm.
because I would be sorely misled and misguided if I thought that my work in these equity spaces, particularly in schools, was going to change everyone's mind, because that's impossible. You
Mm-hmm.
can't change everyone's mind. But what you can do is create spaces where those that want to have these conversations, or understand, I don't say want to have, understand the importance of these conversations, can do so in a healthy way with the proper language,
Mm-hmm.
because having established language is also very important for changing social norms
Mm-hmm.
when we're all calling the stuff the same thing.
Right. Yeah, and I think it's only having those spaces is only like part of it, right? And so we have to, for the folks who don't want to make these kind of changes, then you make systems to regulate that. The same way we regulate that if you want a loaf of bread and you can't pay for it, then you can't get it. There's we regulate our behaviors to keep people from hurting each other. And um, right now what we're seeing is people trying to regulate behavior to facilitate people hurting each other. Like
Yeah.
I mean, we're literally on the cusp of people burning books. And if they ain't already, I'm pretty sure they're already doing it. And so, like, I mean, I just watched a thing with
We're at
LeVar
the
Burton.
ban phase. I don't know if they
Yeah,
burned them yet, but they're definitely banning them.
right. And I mean, they're burning books that they use mice to help people understand Nazism, right? And saying that that's offensive. Like, if you can't have a story about mice and totalitarian and like using mice as an understanding of it, then like how do we have a conversation about this stuff?
You
And how
don't,
do
and that's the point.
right, exactly. Yeah, that's the point.
Like,
They don't
you
want to talk
don't.
about it.
I know, again, one of the issues, one of the books that was banned, I believe, was Ruby Bridges' book.
Mm-hmm.
And the rationale for it being banned is that there was no redemption in the end.
Mm-hmm.
It was not a redemptive story. And it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well, it was based on something that actually happened, and this is how it ended. So I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what it is, that what type of redemption you want, because I mean, we wait no redemption too. Like, I don't understand what's happening here.
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's the thing is there's this really strong need to be seen in a positive light.
Yeah.
And like that is the essence of privilege, right? It's the essence of the history written by the victor kind of stuff, right? Like it's saying that we don't want to acknowledge or understand or see any of the stuff that we've done up until yesterday. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like, and you, again, there will be negative consequences for you if you remind us of that, or if you act in alignment with the idea that the way we treated you yesterday and 2 minutes ago is going to continue. There's something wrong with you.
Right.
And that's kind of, I mean, that's the dilemma that we find ourselves in. And it's the dilemma, I think, that's been kind of cyclic. I mean, it happens over and over again. um I mean, I remember when I was a kid, like Huck Finn, right? Like the whole thing about, do you have the N word in Huck Finn or do you not have the N word in Huck Finn, or
Right.
should you even read Huck Finn? Because if you read it with the N word and it's taught properly, Huck Finn is a really good book to explain exactly how messed up it was. You know what I'm saying? If you take the N word out, or you don't talk about the ramifications and the violence of that word, then it's a book that can harm folks. But like
Yeah.
again, in the end, I mean, like another side to this is just the lack of trust for the skill of teaching, or trusting that if you let teachers teach, then the outcome is going to be something where the person grows, and they don't want that. You know what I mean? So.
Well, I mean, the reality of the situation is that what we're witnessing
Mm-hmm.
is the overt controlling of a narrative. And
Right.
normally it's more esoteric than this.
Mm-hmm.
It's more subtle, but now it's just no, this is the narrative that we want to convey, and
Mm-hmm.
these are the lengths that we're going to go to
Mm-hmm.
control that narrative.
Right.
And we don't care that people are seeing the people behind the curtain controlling the narrative anymore. What we
Right.
care about is the fact that the grandchildren, I saw this somewhere and it stuck with me. It said basically what we're witnessing in real time is the grandchildren or the people that threw rocks at Ruby Bridges not wanting their grandchildren to know they threw rocks at Ruby Bridges.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
that was probably the most succinct way that I've ever seen it summed up.
Yeah.
And that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
Yeah. And I think the key to understanding part of this is like that the same people are fine with us understanding that our ancestors went through enslavement, and when I
Yeah.
identify us as the descendants of slaves as opposed to people who were trafficked. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Um, you asked earlier, how do we have these conversations? How do we start these conversations with kids? And I think that the way that you do that is you treat it very much like you treat any other kind of conversation where you want to protect the safety of your child. When you're talking about being like, for instance, one of the things that I talk about in trainings is like talk about people touching your hair the same way you talk about touching other parts of your body. Like people should not have permission to touch you. Period. Doesn't matter if it's your hair, it's your arm, or wherever. And if someone does, come tell me. You
Yeah.
know, like if you're having conversations with your kids, ask them about what teachers say. You know, what who's talked to you about your skin color today? Has anybody ever brought that up to you? How do people talk to you at school? How are you treated? What do your friends look like? What do the other kids look like? What do they talk about? Like be like hit it with curiosity and like because kids will tell you the truth. They'll tell you
Yeah.
exactly what happened, but sometimes you have to ask because so much stuff happens to them. I mean, I know half the things I happened to me at school I didn't tell my parents about. But if they would have asked about it, I probably would have said
Yeah.
something. And we cope and we're resilient and we do all this stuff. But like, I think that a lot of times we see our children as not being complex thinkers when in fact they really are.
Mm-hmm.
They're experiencing stuff, they're going to remember stuff, and it affects the way that they see things. And if you address some of this stuff and give them the right information early, then they don't have to go through some of the struggles that you and I probably went through.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you see that, and it's not going to get rid of all the struggles, and it's not going to get rid of all the pain, but it'll help. And I think the same thing goes for like kids, like white kids, Asian kids, Latin kids, whoever. If you get with them early, like little white kids who grew up around black kids, who had parents who talk about progressive and anti-racist stuff, they function better everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like straight up, they are more marketable. And like if you're talking about, so if there's some white parents watching right now, your kids will be more healthy if you talk to them about race early. Straight up, they'll be
Just
better
like
in everything
anything,
that
if
they
it's
do.
been addressed, you work less hard to figure out how to navigate your way.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that that's the thing is like we can't like live in a space where we allow them like justice can't be stigmatized. Whatever you're talking about.
Anymore.
Well, yeah, I'm saying like sometimes we have to like approach the conversation that way.
Yeah.
And I think that the best ways to understand that is we think about it in terms of our own spaces of oppression and marginalization, and we also have to apply that into like the spaces where we have privilege. So when you do that, you get both sides of the argument, you get stronger at understanding it, right? So I keep talking about me as a man because that informs me about how white people hear my message as a black person. You know what I'm saying? And what kind of emotions go through their mind and through their heart, because I understand the emotions that go through my heart when I'm in the space of the oppressor. And so understanding both of those sides make you, I think, you're able to make more compelling arguments because you're like, hey, look, I know what this is. You know, it also means that we have to, you know, watch out for our kids in other spaces.
Right.
So I think the same way that we're promoting talking about, race to young kids, we should be talking about sexuality. We should be talking about
Yeah.
sexual identity. And we should be talking about gender. We should be talking about all these different pieces that I think, and I'm gonna flip it on Black folks right now and just say like, yo, we need to be talking about all that stuff, because why would you want to raise like a transphobic kid? How's that
Yeah.
serve them?
I mean,
You know what I'm saying?
these are all conversations that we need to have for certain. Because we've got to get more informed about everything as a human, as
Mm-hmm.
humans. And
Mm-hmm.
I guess I think you answered my next question already. So I am just going to, unless you have anything else you want to share, I am just going to jump to how do we find you and how do we get your books?
I'll jump with you to the how do we find. So I am on social media. You can find me at DRBF Palmer on Twitter, Instagram, pretty much any of the platforms. If you look at DRBF Palmer, you'll be able to find me. My website is deeperthancolor.com. So deeper than THAN color, COLOR. There's no U there, but you can put it in because I got that one too.
Look at
Um,
you. Someone is
and
asking for a quick synopsis of Black Joy again.
quick synopsis of Black Joy. So Joy is a little girl whose parents, who's she's multiracial, multi-ethnic, but she presents as Black. Her parents are kind of her parents have a conversation with her about the difference between the being brown and identifying as Black, right? So her skin color is brown, but Black as a racial concept is discussed in terms of it being a story. Um, the story moves through, so the story of Joy having this conversation moves through them walking through a neighborhood, seeing art on the wall that depicts the concept of race as a story, and then moving through talking about how we can reconceptualize and re-understand race as or specifically Blackness as a positive, useful, wonderful thing that we can have joy in, even if it was created in order to oppress us.
Perfect. You're at Dr. BF Palmer on Twitter and Instagram. Do you
Yes.
have a public Facebook page you want to share?
If you look up Bedford Palmer on Facebook, you can find me there. Same with Deeper Than Color. The books if you look up blackjoybook.com, you'll find the website for the Black Joy book.
And I will
Um,
post all of these to my
yeah.
page as well. To my
But if
page
you
as well.
find me, yeah, if you find me on Instagram or on Twitter, I got the link tree, and you can get me that way.
Oh, okay. Then I will, but I'll definitely drop them in this correspondence as well. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to me today.
I appreciate you inviting me on.
Of
I felt all
course.
special. I was like, "Ooh, I got invited. I get to be on the conversation, strong conversations. I'm gonna have a strong
Yes, and
conversation."
I was happy you came. So for those of you that will be with us, that will be with me next week. Next week is around these same things. Do Black Lives Matter in school? A strong conversation about educational equity, and it will be a panel that will be moderated by the Tamara Winfrey Harris. And there will be more about that coming up later. And you all know where to find me. Strong Conversations on Facebook and Dr. Carolyn Strong on Twitter. Until next time, y'all have a good one.
Thank you.